On the back of record high remittances, the property counter is poised to end the day as the runaway winner in the equity space. So, is remittance growth being reflected in all corners of the real estate market? And to answer that, let me bring in Dinbo Macaranias of Colliers, who joins us live in studio today. Dinbo, thank you. I read your report. It was really, really interesting. So, so if you consider record remittances last March, did we see that same uptake in residential offices with Colliers? Did you notice that as well?
Yes. Actually, if you look at the numbers of launches and take-ups for the first quarter alone.
So we have the remittances here, so it's actually, it came in at 10.7.
10.7. But if you look at on the residential side, the launches and take-ups in particular reached close to 11,000 units. And if you compare that with what we ended with in 2016, where it was around 41,000 units already, a simple run rate of this would translate to a higher take-up versus 2016. So we see that trend actually translating to the real estate
So
market.
we're going to continue on this trend that we saw last year, the uptake which
it
is the
appears,
green one.
It appears, if you look at 2015 and 2016, there was a rebound on the darker green bar.
Which is the uptick.
Which is the uptick. And then if you look at 2017, a simple run rate of this would translate to essentially close to 44,000 units already. And
So
that would be higher than 2016.
All right. Now, what does that tell us about the real estate market, at least with residentials?
Yeah, if you look at the real estate market, it's still going to continue to be robust as far as the take-ups. We note that there's some decline as far as your launches. However, note that the launches, it takes a while before them to be taken up. So these take-ups are really from the launches of prior years already.
Okay, so if you're noticing a slowdown in launches right now in the first quarter, you're seeing down 36% year on year, when will we start feeling the crunch in uptake or available units or supply?
Well, right now, there's a lot of available units already because there were a lot of launches also in prior years.
That's true.
So that's really just a cycle that's going on in the market. But overall, in terms of take-up, it means that people are still wanting to buy more condominium units.
Now, the question is, what do we do with all these units? In your report, you mentioned recommending to developers to actually offer a lot more wallet-friendly schemes, whether it's a flexi-pay or rent-to-own or even leasing their own units out. You've noted, lease agreements are shorter from 1 year. Now it's 6 months, 3 months, 2 months, or 1 day if you follow like the Airbnb model, right? So you're recommending that developers do this. Why?
Well, essentially, if you look at it, particularly for your high-end luxury condominiums, there's an issue of security and there's an issue of being able to manage who comes in and out of the facility. And by coming up with these schemes, they get to manage actually the profile of the ones that are using the units. And it appeases the concerns of end users who own the unit.
Well, so you
and
think
at the same time, Sean, if you look at vacancies, they're actually rising across the different submarkets. And in order to address that increase in vacancy, we note that, or we recommend really, that they go into these schemes that will enable them to actually fill up their spaces, or for those who invested previously in wanting to rent them out, it's easier for them to rent them out if the different developers have leasing arms to help them with it.
So I'm guessing you're saying this because you've noticed that this model is actually working, at least with some of the first movers within the property space that are already doing this.
Yes, well, an example of it would be your Siglo Suites by your Century Properties.
Okay.
Really, at the end of the day, it's a question of do they go through Airbnb or do they go through your mediums where it's more manageable for them?
Like go to the own leasing office of the building,
exactly.
ganyan. Okay, so how about this? Rents also in major CBDs are slowly declining. Is the market cooling or is this normal? Should we hit the panic button?
Well, I think it's normal right now. At the end of the day, as we mentioned, we note that there are a lot of launches also from prior years. Currently, there were 3,100 units completed for the quarter. We note that it can potentially rise up to 22,000 units. So it's just natural for the market to adjust as far as trends, given that there are a lot of RFOs. But overall, given these schemes that they can apply or employ in their models, then they could actually fill up those vacancies that are available.
Right. Well, I want to ask you about another model that's emerging. Again, another way to fill up, I guess, buildings, or if there's such projects like that. I'm talking about worker accommodation projects. Now, I have to get used to that term. I'm talking about projects like My Town. Let's bring up a brand so it's more easy to remember. This is a new business model. So tell us how, the market is taking to this sort of accommodation.
Okay, so these are basically your dormitory type of accommodations.
And not just for students.
Not just for students, primarily for your workers. Particularly for the Philippines where traffic is an issue, this will be a key component of the dynamics of the market, where they can occupy these spaces as a halfway house, or let's say...
I was waiting for that term, is it a halfway house?
Let's
so it
say,
is,
yes, it is, basically, just to work around the traffic within the metro while you're working within the weekdays.
Okay, so let's move on over to, speaking of work, offices and BPOs. Again, the BPO, of course, has been the rockstar sector the past years, but your report notes that in the first quarter, compared to the first quarter last year, we only have about a third of BPOs left, so we can see that here. BPO just make up 21% of transactions as opposed to 60% in the same period last year. But it's okay because you also mentioned that, may sumalo naman.
Yes, exactly.
Can you tell us kung sino yung sumalo?
Okay. Yung sumalo is actually your traditional companies. There was a shift from the 60% in 2016 to the first quarter of 2017 where the share, as you mentioned, is actually down to 21%. But if you look at the breakdown of these traditional companies, there are a lot of them. For instance, there were cement companies, energy companies, there were also IT firms that took up spaces in the first quarter of 2016. And on top of that, if you look at it, you're approximately 50% of the take-up in 2017, in the first quarter, were from your traditional companies. And then 9% of that, Sean, actually came from your government agencies as well. So
so that's new. Actually, you know what? We have this pie chart. There you go. Perfect timing. Just to make it clearer. So non-BPO is now here, which is a lot, which is
40.
Really huge, right? So this one came out of nowhere, government agency. And then gaming, wow, 30% second place. Can you tell us about these new tenants in our profile?
Okay, first off, your gaming. Your offshore gambling is really your casino that services primarily your foreign bettors. But we noted that already in our prior quarters report, and we noted that it can potentially actually drive the demand in the office sector for 2017. And so we see that here. Yes, actually, given that that PAGCOR actually released 35 licenses, that can easily translate to even 300,000 square meters of take-up this year. And if you look at it this quarter alone, it reached 54,000. So, I mean, your guess is as good as mine as to how much it will comprise of the entire transaction. But the fact of the matter is, it is part of the market today. And then moving on, if you look at your government agencies, it comprise 9,000 square meters of office space.
So they're renting now space
more than
from the private sector.
Yes, correct. Actually, if you look at it, I think they're moving from their older offices onto newer buildings. And we see that
closer to, I guess, where the people are.
Generally, we note that these transactions take place in mostly in the fringe areas outside of your CBD, but very close to it.
What we call Gillage.
Yes,
right?
exactly. And then, of course, your traditional companies also is taking up spaces in, not just in CBDs, but all across the entire market. And as we mentioned, it's about 40% already of the entire transaction pie.
All right, that said, I guess nothing to worry about, and looking forward to next quarter.
Sure.
You look very happy, so I'm a little bit comforted that the market is still pretty much robust. Thank you very much, Dinbo, for joining us today. Dinbo from Colliers, guys.